Kethvar's 6 eyes hurt from staring at the star charts for 12 hours straight. The blue glow from his workstation painted strange shadows across his gray skin as he worked through another batch of survey data from the outer rim. As the chief cartographer for the Zephyrian Galactic Survey, he had mapped more star systems than any being alive. His maps guided trade routes across half the galaxy. Governments paid millions for his work. But today, something was wrong. He rubbed his eyes and looked at the data again. The readings were clear. 3 star systems existed in Sector 7749 Delta that were not on any official map. Not just missing from recent charts, but absent from every database going back 3,000 years. Computer, run another scan of Sector 7749 Delta, he said to his workstation. The machine hummed for several minutes before displaying the results. 3 bright dots appeared on his screen, each representing a full solar system with planets, moons, and asteroid fields. According to his instruments, these systems had been there for billions of years. Yet somehow every mapmaker in galactic history had missed them. Kethvar pulled up the master database that contained every star chart ever created by the Galactic Confederation. He searched for any mention of the 3 systems. Nothing. He expanded his search to include survey logs, exploration reports, and even old navigation records from merchant ships. Still nothing. It was impossible. You could not hide 3 entire star systems. He stood up and walked to the large window of his office. Outside, the lights of the survey station blinked against the darkness of space. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species worked here, all dedicated to mapping the galaxy. They prided themselves on knowing every rock, every gas cloud, every grain of space dust within 1,000 light years. But they had missed 3 star systems. Kethvar returned to his desk and began checking nearby sectors. What he found made his blood run cold. The 3 mystery systems were not alone. As he expanded his search, he found more. Dozens of them, all unmarked on every official map, yet clearly visible to his instruments. The hidden systems formed a pattern. They created a perfect sphere around a region of space that old charts marked only as the Silent Zone. Most modern maps did not even show that label anymore. It was just empty space, marked as surveyed but uninteresting. He had never paid attention to the Silent Zone before. It was just another empty region among thousands in the galaxy. But now he noticed something strange about it. The region was too empty. No stars, no planets, no gas clouds, no cosmic debris. Nothing at all for hundreds of light years in every direction. Empty space was normal in a galaxy, but not this empty. Space always contained something, even if it was just hydrogen atoms or cosmic radiation. The Silent Zone showed absolutely nothing on any sensor. It was like a hole cut out of reality. Kethvar worked through the night, mapping every hidden system he could find. By morning, he had located over 200 star systems that existed but were not on any map. They formed rings around the Silent Zone like guards standing watch over a prison. The oldest charts in the database, some dating back 50,000 years, showed the same pattern. The same empty zone, the same missing systems. Whatever had created this situation had been in place since before recorded galactic history. At dawn, Kethvar printed out his findings and walked to his supervisor's office. Veltar was an old Centaurian who had been mapping stars since before Kethvar was born. If anyone would understand what this meant, it would be him. "Sir, I need to show you something," Kethvar said as he entered the office. Veltar looked up from his own work, his forearms continuing to type while his main eyes focused on Kethvar. "What is it? You look like you have seen a ghost." "Maybe. I have." Kethvar spread his charts across Veltar's desk. "Look at these readings from the outer rim. I have found star systems that exist but are not on any map." Veltar's typing stopped. All 4 of his arms went still as he leaned forward to examine the charts. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he gathered up all the papers and fed them into the disposal unit beside his desk. "These are charting errors," Veltar said calmly. "Old equipment sometimes creates false readings. You should recalibrate your instruments." Kethvar stared at him. "Sir, I ran the scans 5 times. I checked them against backup systems. These are not equipment errors. Those star systems are real. No, they are not. Veltar's voice carried a tone Kethvar had never heard before. Cold and final. And you will not mention this again to anyone, ever. But sir, the conversation is over, Kethvar. Return to your regular duties. Map the systems we know about, and forget about phantom readings from faulty equipment. Kethvar left the office in shock. In 20 years of working with Veltar, he had never seen his supervisor act like that. The old Centaurian was known for his careful, methodical approach to everything. He never dismissed data without thorough investigation. Back at his workstation, Kethvar stared at his screens. The hidden star systems were still there. His instruments showed them as clearly as they showed the station's own sun. Whatever was happening, it was not an equipment malfunction. He began to research the silent zone itself. Most databases contained almost no information about it. A few old exploration reports mentioned failed attempts to survey the region. Ships would approach the boundary and then turn back, reporting navigation failures or equipment problems. In the deepest archives, Kethvar found fragments of much older records, references to the containment and the watchers and the price of forgetting. Most of these files were heavily corrupted or partially deleted. But one phrase appeared over and over again in the oldest texts. They must never be remembered. Who were they? What was being contained in the silent zone? And why were star systems arranged around it like a defensive wall? As the days passed, Kethvar found himself checking the hidden systems obsessively. They remained exactly where his instrument said they should be. Solid, real, and impossible to ignore. Yet every time he tried to add them to official charts, his computer would reject the data as unverified or corrupted. Someone or something did not want these systems to be mapped. Late one night, while working alone in his office, Kethvar made a discovery that chilled him to his core. He was studying the boundary of the silent zone when he noticed something his instruments had missed before. The zone was not perfectly empty. There was something at its center. Something that absorbed all energy directed at it, making it invisible to normal sensors. But by measuring how gravity bent around the region, he could detect its presence. Whatever was hidden in the silent zone was massive. Not just a planet or a star, but something the size of an entire solar system. And according to his readings, it was moving. The thing in the silent zone was testing the boundaries of its prison, probing the walls that kept it contained. And with each test, the hidden star systems around the zone grew brighter, as if they were responding to whatever was trapped inside. Kethvar realized that he was not just looking at a map error or a natural phenomenon. He was looking at the galaxy's greatest secret, something so dangerous that entire civilizations had worked together to hide it from history. And now, after millions of years, that something was trying to break free. Dr. Yilithess brushed the ancient dust from the crystal surface with her smallest tools. After 3 months of careful excavation on Valdris Prime, she had finally reached the deepest level of the precursor ruins. The chamber around her was older than most civilizations in the galaxy. The walls were covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to shift and change when she was not focusing on them. Her translation computer had given up trying to decode them after the first week, simply displaying error messages whenever she pointed it at the writing. But the crystal was different. It was perfectly clear, like frozen starlight, and it hummed with energy that her instruments could barely detect. As she cleaned away the last of the debris, symbols began to appear inside the crystal itself, not carved or etched, but floating in the material like thoughts made solid. "Computer, begin recording," she said to her portable workstation. "Archaeological log, day 93. I have discovered what appears to be a precursor data storage device. The technology is unlike anything in current galactic databases." She activated her scanner and pointed it at the crystal. The device immediately overloaded and shut down. Whatever was stored in the crystal used energy patterns that her equipment was not designed to handle. Yila had spent her entire career studying precursor artifacts. The ancient race had vanished millions of years ago, leaving behind only ruins and technology that no one could understand. Most scholars believed the precursors had simply evolved beyond the need for physical existence. But this crystal was different from other precursor artifacts. It felt newer somehow, as if it had been created not by the precursors themselves but by someone who had learned their techniques. She tried a different approach. Instead of using her scanner, she placed her hand directly on the crystal's surface. The moment her skin touched the material, images flooded her mind. She saw stars being born and dying in seconds, galaxies spinning like pinwheels across the cosmos, and then she saw something that made her gasp and pull her hand away. Ships. Massive ships that dwarfed anything in the current galaxy. But these were not built by any species she recognized. The designs were strange and organic, as if they had been grown rather than constructed. And moving through them were beings that looked almost familiar. They walked on two legs and had two arms like several current galactic species. But there was something about them that was different. They moved with purpose and confidence that seemed almost supernatural, and their technology was impossible. She watched one of them wave his hand at a broken machine. The device immediately repaired itself, its metal flowing like liquid until it was perfect again. Another being touched a wall and it became transparent, revealing the stars beyond. A third simply pointed at empty space, and matter began to form, from nothing, creating tools and structures with thought alone. Yila placed her hand on the crystal again, forcing herself to watch despite the overwhelming images. She needed to understand what she was seeing. The vision showed her a galaxy very different from the one she knew. These strange beings, who called themselves humans, had spread across the stars in just a few centuries. They did not conquer worlds through war. Instead, they transformed them. Barren planets became gardens. Dead systems came alive with artificial suns. Entire regions of space were reshaped to support life. But it was not just their technology that was amazing. The humans themselves were changing. Each generation was smarter, stronger, and more capable than the last. They learned to live forever, then to exist without physical bodies when they chose. They created machines that could think and feel, then taught those machines to create even smarter machines. Within 1,000 years, humans had become something that was barely recognizable as the species that had first left their home world. They were living gods capable of reshaping reality with their will alone. And that was when the galaxy became afraid. The crystal showed her meetings between the oldest species in the galaxy. Beings that had existed for hundreds of millions of years who had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on a beach. These ancient races had watched the humans with growing terror. The humans were not evil. That was what made them so frightening. They genuinely wanted to help everyone. They offered to share their technology, to eliminate death and suffering from the galaxy, to make every world a paradise. But their idea of paradise was not what other species wanted. The humans believed that all pain was unnecessary, that every problem could be solved, that every limitation could be overcome. They could not understand why anyone would choose to remain mortal or accept hardship as part of life. When some species refused their help, the humans simply waited. They knew that eventually desperation would force every civilization to accept their gift. A plague here, a natural disaster there, and suddenly their offer of immortality would seem more attractive. The ancient species realized that the humans were not trying to conquer the galaxy. They were trying to save it, and that salvation would destroy everything that made life meaningful. The crystal showed her the war that followed. It was not a war fought with weapons or ships. It was a war fought with reality itself. The humans had learned to rewrite the laws of physics while their enemies used ancient technologies that could lock space and time into rigid patterns. The battle raged across dimensions that ordinary minds could not even perceive. Star systems were used as ammunition. Entire regions of space were folded in on themselves. At one point, the humans created a new universe just to see if it was possible, then forgot about it when they became distracted by other projects. The war lasted for millions of years, though time itself became meaningless during the conflict. Neither side could truly defeat the other. The humans were too adaptable and creative to be destroyed, while the ancient species were too numerous and experienced to be converted. Finally, the oldest beings in the galaxy came up with a solution. They could not kill the humans or change. their minds, but they could contain them. Using technology that combined the knowledge of 1,000 different species, they built a prison around the humans' home region. The prison was not made of metal or energy. It was made of space itself, twisted and folded until the area inside became separate from the rest of the galaxy. The humans were not destroyed, but they were removed from reality, placed in a bubble where their power could not affect the outside universe. To make sure no one would ever try to free the humans, every record of them was destroyed. Their name was forbidden. Their worlds were erased from every map. Even the species that had helped build the prison agreed to have their memories altered, so that future generations would not know what they had done. The crystal showed her the aftermath. The galaxy slowly returned to normal. Death and suffering resumed their natural roles. Progress continued, but at a pace that did not threaten the fundamental nature of existence. But the prison was not perfect. It required constant maintenance, and that maintenance was provided by the guardian systems that surrounded the Silent Zone. Star systems that existed but were not mapped, filled with ancient technology that kept the containment stable. As the visions faded, Yila realized the terrible truth. The humans were still alive inside their prison. Millions of years had passed, but beings who had conquered death would not have aged or died. They had been waiting, learning, growing more powerful with each passing century. And according to the crystal's final message, the prison was beginning to fail. The last image showed her humans as they were now, after eons of isolation. They no longer had physical bodies at all, existing as pure consciousness that could take any form they desired. They had built machines that could think universes into existence, developed sciences that made gods seem primitive. They had also learned patience. They knew their prison would eventually weaken, and they were prepared for their return. But they would not come back as the beings that had been contained. They would return as something far beyond what the galaxy had feared before. The crystal went dark, leaving Yila alone in the ancient chamber. Her hands were shaking as she realized what she had discovered. She was looking at the galaxy's greatest secret and its greatest threat. Somewhere in the Silent Zone, humanity was preparing to come home. Commander Zax Krelian checked his weapon systems one final time as his ship approached the coordinates. His strike team consisted of 12 of the Confederation's best soldiers, each from a different species, each trained to handle situations that normal military units could not imagine. Today's mission briefing had been classified beyond top secret. They were investigating energy signatures from the edge of the Silent Zone that had appeared on deep space sensors 3 days ago. The readings made no sense according to known physics, but they were definitely artificial. "Commander, we are approaching the target coordinates," reported his pilot, a 4-armed Vexian named Crix. "Sensors are showing some kind of structure ahead." Zax looked at his display screen. What he saw should have been impossible. Floating in empty space was a ship unlike anything in the galactic databases. It was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, but its shape was wrong. The vessel seemed to exist in several dimensions at once, its outline shifting and blurring as he watched. "All teams, prepare for boarding," Zax commanded through his communicator. "Remember, we are here to gather information only. Do not engage unless directly threatened." As their shuttle approached the alien ship, Zax could see that it was covered in damage. Massive holes had been torn in its hull and entire sections were missing. But strangest of all, he could watch the ship repairing itself. Metal flowed like liquid to fill the gaps while new components grew from the existing structure like living tissue. "Commander, this is Engineer Velke," came a voice through his headset. "My instruments are showing impossible readings from that ship. According to my scanners, parts of it exist in parallel dimensions." "Explain," Zax replied as their shuttle entered through one of the larger holes in the ship's hull. "The ship is drawing materials from other versions of itself in different realities. When something gets damaged, it pulls replacement parts from dimensions where that section was never broken." Zax had been a soldier for 30 years, but this was beyond anything he had encountered. "Stay alert, everyone. We have no idea what we are dealing with." They landed in what appeared to be a cargo bay. The chamber was filled with containers that seemed to be made of crystallized light. When Zax's team approached them, the containers became transparent, revealing technology that hurt to look at directly. "Sir, these devices are scanning us," reported Lieutenant Thoss, his team's technology specialist. "But not with any kind of energy I recognize. It feels like they are reading our thoughts." As if responding to Thoss's words, the containers began to open. From each one emerged a mechanical being about the size of a person. They were not built like any robots Zax had seen before. Instead of metal plates and mechanical joints, they seemed to be made of flowing energy held in roughly humanoid shapes. The robots did not attack. Instead, they began to communicate, though not through any language. Images appeared directly in the minds of Zax's team, showing them the ship's history. The vessel was ancient beyond imagination, but it was not built by the ship's current occupants. It had been captured and modified by beings who called themselves humans. The robots showed images of these humans, and Zax was surprised by how ordinary they looked. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, just like several current galactic species. But there was nothing ordinary about what these humans could do. The images showed humans rebuilding the ship using technology that seemed like magic. They did not use tools or machines. Instead, they simply touched broken components and willed them back to working condition. They created new materials by combining elements that should not have been able to exist together. They even modified the ship's basic structure, adding rooms that were larger inside than outside. "Commander, we need to leave," urged Dr. Nethra, the team's scientist. "This technology is far beyond our understanding. If these humans are still here..." She was interrupted by a new series of images from the robots. The humans were gone. The machines explained, but they had left behind instructions. The ship was now running automatically, following programs that had been designed millions of years ago. But the programs were becoming unstable. The ship had been drifting near the edge of the silent zone for centuries, and something was calling to it from inside that forbidden region. The automated systems were trying to respond to the call, but their programming prevented them from entering the zone directly. Instead, the ship was building things: new machines, new technologies, new weapons, all of them designed according to human specifications that the ship's computers had stored. The robots showed images of these creations, and Zax felt his blood run cold. The humans had designed weapons that could destroy entire star systems by convincing their atoms to forget how to exist. They had built machines that could turn planets into thinking beings. They had created devices that could reach into other dimensions and drag armies of creatures made from pure mathematics. All of these weapons were being constructed automatically, prepared for a war that the ship's programming insisted was coming. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission," reported his communications officer. "It is coming from inside the silent zone itself." Zax activated his personal communicator. What he heard was not a voice, but something that spoke directly to his mind. The words were in his own language, but they carried meanings that his thoughts could barely contain. "The barriers weaken," the transmission said. "Soon the waiting will end. Prepare for integration. Resistance will be corrected. Fear will be eliminated. Paradise will be restored." The message repeated several times before cutting off. When it ended, Zax noticed that his team members were all staring at him with expressions of terror. "Did everyone hear that?" he asked. "Hear it?" replied Lieutenant Thoss. "Sir, that message was not transmitted through our communicators. It was broadcast directly into our minds, bypassing our equipment entirely." Dr. Nethra was scanning the Shior area around them with her instruments. "Commander, I am detecting massive energy buildups throughout this region of space. Whatever is in the silent zone is becoming more active." The robots aboard the ship confirmed her readings through more mental images. Ancient systems that had been dormant for millions of years were awakening. Guardian satellites around the silent zone were reporting failures in their containment fields. And deep inside the forbidden region, something vast and patient was finally beginning to move. "All teams return to the shuttle immediately," Zax ordered. "We need to report this to command." As they prepared to leave, the robots transmitted one final set of images. They showed the ship's destination, where its automated programming was directing it to go. The vessel was heading toward the heart of the galaxy, to the worlds where billions of beings lived in ignorance of the approaching danger. The ship was not just carrying weapons, it was carrying a message, a gift from the humans to the galaxy that had imprisoned them. When it reached its destination, it would begin converting everything it touched, transforming matter and energy according to human designs. Death would become impossible. Suffering would be eliminated. Every being in the galaxy would be given perfection, whether they wanted it or not. During the flight back to their base, Zax tried to file his report through normal channels, but every time he attempted to transmit the information, his communication system would malfunction. When he tried to record the data manually, his equipment would develop sudden technical problems. Something did not want the galaxy to know what was happening at the edge of the silent zone. By the time they reached headquarters, Zax realized that his team was being monitored by forces beyond his understanding. His mission had been observed, his discoveries noted, his report prepared for filing in archives that would never be opened. But this time was different. The ancient conspiracy that had hidden humanity from galactic memory was losing its power. Too many people were discovering the truth. Too many systems were failing. Too many warnings were being ignored. As Zax submitted his report to his commanding officer, he wondered if anyone in the galaxy was prepared for what was coming. Humanity had been contained for millions of years, but their technology had not been sleeping. It had been growing, learning, preparing for the day when the barriers would finally fall. And according to everything he had seen, that day was almost here. The ship they had investigated was just the beginning. Soon, similar vessels would emerge from the silent zone by the thousands, carrying humanity's gift to a galaxy that had tried so hard to forget them. Whether the galaxy wanted salvation or not, it was about to receive it. Ambassador Helios Nilthera had seen many emergency sessions of the Galactic Confederation Council, but never one like this. The Great Chamber on the capital world of Centros held representatives from over 1,000 species, yet for the first time in her memory, no one was arguing. They were all too terrified to speak. The evidence had finally become impossible to ignore. Reports from cartographers finding unmapped star systems, archaeological discoveries that revealed hidden histories, military encounters with technology that should not exist, all pointing to the same terrible conclusion. The galaxy's greatest secret was about to be revealed. The emergency session will come to order, announced Council Speaker Vorthak, his ancient voice carrying across the vast chamber. At over 800 years old, the Eternal was one of the oldest beings in current galactic politics. But even he looked shaken by what they had gathered to discuss. "We are here to address a matter that has been classified beyond all normal security levels," Vorthak continued. "What you will learn today must never leave this chamber. The stability of our entire civilization depends upon maintaining certain arrangements that have protected the galaxy for millions of years." Helios felt a chill run down her spine. In her 50 years as a diplomat, she had negotiated peace treaties, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. She had helped prevent 3 different wars and established colonies on a dozen worlds. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for what she sensed was coming. "The floor recognizes Elder Zethmore of the Ancient Assembly," Vorthak announced. Being rose from the front row that Helios had never seen before. Zethmore was clearly old beyond imagination, his crystalline body showing stress fractures that spoke of eons of existence. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that seemed to echo from across time itself. "My people have waited 4 million years to give this testimony," Zethmore began. "We had hoped never to speak these words again, but circumstances force us to reveal what we and others have worked so long to conceal." The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of translation systems working to convert Zethmore's ancient language into forms that current species could understand. "Long ago, when your civilizations were still learning to make fire, a young species emerged from a small world in what you now call the Silent Zone. They called themselves humans and they changed everything." Helios felt her breathing become shallow. Humans. The name was not in any historical database she knew of, yet something about it felt familiar. as if it had been carefully erased from memory rather than simply forgotten. The humans were not the strongest or smartest species when they first left their world, Zethmore continued, but they possessed something that no other race had ever demonstrated to such a degree. They refused to accept limitations. Where other species saw problems, humans saw puzzles to be solved. Where others accepted death, disease, and suffering as natural parts of existence, humans declared war on the very concept of inevitable hardship. Images began to appear on the chamber's main display screen. Helios gasped as she saw recordings of beings that looked remarkably similar to several current galactic species, yet somehow fundamentally different. They moved with confidence and purpose that seemed almost supernatural. Within a few centuries of leaving their homeworld, humans had spread across hundreds of systems, Zethmore explained. But they did not conquer these worlds. They transformed them. Dead planets became gardens. Barren systems were filled with artificial stars. Entire regions of space were reshaped to support forms of life that had never existed before. The images showed impossible landscapes. Planets where the sky rained liquid starlight. Worlds where the mountains were made of crystallized music. Systems where the stars themselves had been arranged into geometric patterns that spelled out messages in languages of pure mathematics. As impressive as their technology was, the humans themselves were even more remarkable, Zethmore continued. Each generation surpassed the last, not through natural evolution, but through deliberate self-improvement. They eliminated genetic diseases, extended their lifespans indefinitely, and eventually learned to exist without physical bodies when they chose to do so. Another elder rose from the assembly section. This being appeared to be made entirely of flowing energy, held together by fields that Helios's eyes could barely focus on. "I am Cathara of the Energy Collective," the being announced. "My people existed as pure consciousness long before the humans appeared. We thought we understood the universe's fundamental nature. The humans proved us wrong." Cathara gestured and new images appeared on the display. These showed technologies that hurt to look at directly, machines that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once, and structures that appeared to be built from crystallized space-time itself. Humans did not just master science, Cathara explained. They transcended it. They learned to rewrite the basic laws of physics through pure will. They created machines that could think new universes into existence. They developed biotechnology that made death an optional inconvenience rather than an inevitable fate. But their greatest achievement, interrupted a third elder, this one appearing as a geometric pattern of shifting shadows, was also their most dangerous. They refused to keep their discoveries to themselves. The shadow being, who identified itself as prime calculator nexus of the logic domains, brought up recordings of human contact with other species. Everywhere humans encountered suffering, they offered solutions, Nexus explained. Plague-ridden worlds were given perfect medical technology. Worlds facing environmental collapse were terraformed into paradises. Species struggling with limited lifespans were offered immortality. Helios watched in fascination and growing horror as the recordings showed humanity's gifts being distributed across the galaxy. Every problem was solved, every limitation overcome, every form of hardship eliminated. On the surface, this seemed like the greatest blessing the galaxy had ever received, said Elder Zethmore. But we soon realized the true cost of human generosity. The images changed to show worlds that had accepted humanity's gifts. At first, they appeared to be utopias. No death, no disease, no want, no suffering of any kind. But as the recordings continued, Helios began to understand the horror. The beings on these worlds were no longer the species they had originally been, Cathara explained. Human technology did not just eliminate suffering, it eliminated the capacity for meaningful choice. When death becomes impossible, life loses its urgency. When all needs are met automatically, desire becomes meaningless. When every problem can be solved with technology, struggle becomes unnecessary. Helios watched as the recordings showed worlds, full of beings who had achieved everything they could ever want, yet seemed empty and purposeless. They moved through their perfect lives like sleepwalkers, going through motions that no longer had any meaning. Worse yet, continued Prime Calculator Nexus, humans could not understand why anyone would refuse their gifts. When some species declined their offers of perfection, humans simply waited. They knew that eventually desperation would force every civilization to accept what they offered. The final horror, said Zethmore, was realizing that humans genuinely believed they were helping us. They could not comprehend that struggle, limitation, and even death might be necessary parts of what makes existence meaningful. They saw the EU, galaxy as broken and themselves as its saviors. The images on the display screen now showed something that made Helios's blood run cold. Human ships approaching worlds whose populations had rejected their offers, not to attack, but to simply wait, in orbit. Eventually, when natural disasters or diseases struck, the desperate inhabitants would call for help, and the humans would respond with gifts that solved their immediate problems while slowly transforming them into something else entirely. That was when the Galaxy Council of that era made the most difficult decision in recorded history, announced Elder Zethmore. The humans could not be reasoned with, because they genuinely believed their actions were moral and necessary. They could not be defeated through conventional warfare, because their technology had advanced beyond our ability to comprehend. So we chose a different solution. We built a prison, said Cathara simply. Using the combined knowledge of every spacefaring civilization, we created a containment field around the humans' core territory. We did not destroy them, but we removed them from our reality, placing them in a pocket dimension where their power could not affect the galaxy. To ensure that no future generation would ever attempt to free them, added Prime Calculator Nexus, we erased every record of their existence. Their name was forbidden, their worlds removed from all maps, their history deleted from every database. Even we who built the prison agreed to have our memories altered, so that only a few of us would remember the truth. Helios felt dizzy as the implications hit her. You mean the silent zone? Contains humanity, yes, confirmed Zethmore. For 4 million years the containment has held. The guardian systems around the prison have maintained the barriers that keep humanity separate from our reality. But now, those barriers are failing. New images appeared on the display, showing recent sensor readings from around the silent zone. Energy signatures were spiking. Ancient. The barriers fell on a Tuesday. Across the galaxy, every sensor array, every deep space monitoring station, every astronomical observatory recorded the same impossible event. The silent zone, which had shown nothing but empty space for millions of years, suddenly blazed with light brighter than 1,000 supernovas. Then the light faded, and humanity came home. Ambassador Helios Nelthara watched from the Emergency Command Center on Centros as the first reports arrived. The beings emerging from the former silent zone bore little resemblance to the humans shown in the ancient records. They appeared as patterns of living light, geometric forms that shifted between dimensions, and occasionally as the familiar two-armed, two-legged shapes that seemed almost quaint by comparison. First contact protocols are useless here, reported Admiral Kessistar, the Confederation's highest-ranking military officer. Our ships cannot even approach them. Every time we try, our vessels simply stop. Not destroyed, not damaged. They just become unable to move forward. General Vexani of the Defense Corps looked up from his tactical displays. Sir, it gets worse. They are not stopping our ships through any kind of force field or weapon. According to our engineers, they are convincing our ship's components that moving forward is impossible. They are rewriting the laws of physics on a local level. Helios studied the main display screen, which showed the positions of human vessels throughout the galaxy. In just 6 hours since the barriers fell, they had appeared in every major system, not through faster-than-light travel, but by simply existing in multiple places simultaneously. How many of them are there, she asked. That's the problem, replied Dr. Thonvar, the science team leader. We cannot count them. Our instruments show anywhere from a few thousand to several billion, depending on how we configure our sensors. I think they exist in a state where numbers are not meaningful. A new voice joined the conversation through the communication system. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, but carried harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the mind. "Greetings to the children of the galaxy," the voice said. "We are what your ancestors called humanity. Though we have grown beyond that simple designation, we have returned to complete the work that was interrupted so long ago." Every being in the command center froze. This was the moment they had been dreading since the emergency council session. "Do not be afraid," the voice continued, somehow conveying warmth and compassion despite its alien nature. "We have not come seeking revenge for our imprisonment. Time has taught us patience and understanding. We know that your ancestors acted from fear, and fear is something we have learned to cure." Admiral Kestar activated his communicator. "This is Admiral Kestar of the Galactic Confederation Defense Fleet. State your intentions." "Our intentions are the same as they were 4 million years ago," came the reply. "We have come to eliminate suffering from the galaxy. Death, disease, want, conflict, and limitation are unnecessary burdens that we can remove. Every being will be given the opportunity to transcend their current existence and join us in a reality where such hardships are impossible." "And if we refuse?" asked General Vexani. There was a pause before the human voice responded, and when it did, there was genuine sadness in its tone. "Refusal is a symptom of incomplete understanding. When you see what we offer, truly see it, you will not refuse. But we have learned patience. We will demonstrate our gifts gradually, allowing each species to accept them at their own pace." The TU main display screen changed to show images from across the galaxy. Human vessels were approaching worlds suffering from plagues, natural disasters, and wars. But they were not landing or attacking. Instead, they were simply removing the sources of suffering. Helios watched in horrified fascination as diseases simply ceased to exist. Weapons stopped functioning not because they were destroyed, but because the concept of harm became temporarily impossible in their vicinity. Natural disasters were prevented by adjusting weather patterns, geological stability, and even planetary orbits with casual ease. On Velthari Prime, they have eliminated a plague that has killed millions, reported Dr. Thonvar, reading from incoming data streams, but they did not cure the disease. They convinced the disease organisms that causing harm was contrary to their nature. The microbes still exist, but now they help maintain their host's health instead of attacking it. Similar reports arrived from dozens of worlds. Everywhere humans appeared, suffering ended. But so did something else that was harder to define. The spark of struggle, the drive to overcome challenges, the meaning that came from facing difficulties and growing stronger. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the human vessel in this system," reported the communications officer. "They are requesting permission to board our station." Before anyone could respond, 3 figures materialized in the command center. Not through transporters or shuttles, but by simply choosing to exist in that location. They appeared as humans, in their classical form, looking exactly like the beings from the ancient records. "I am David Chen," said the first figure, his voice carrying the same harmonics as the earlier transmission. "These are my colleagues, Sarah Martinez and Ahmed Hassan. We were among the first humans to achieve consciousness transfer, and we volunteered to serve as ambassadors to your current reality." Helios found herself staring at beings who looked completely ordinary, yet radiated a presence that made her feel like an insect in comparison. They moved with casual confidence that suggested they could reshape the station around them without effort. "We understand your fear," said Sarah Martinez, her expression kind but somehow terrifying in its absolute certainty. "Your ancestors feared us because they believed we would destroy what made you unique. They were wrong, but their error was understandable." Ahmed Hassan gestured, and the air around him filled with images that showed humanity's true vision for the galaxy. Worlds where every being existed in perfect harmony, where death was impossible, where every need was met before it could even be felt. But the beings in these images moved with the same empty purposelessness that Helios had seen in the ancient records. "We do not seek to make you like us," Ahmed explained. "We seek to make you the best possible versions of yourselves. Every species will retain their unique characteristics but freed from the limitations that cause unnecessary pain. What about choice? Asked Admiral Kessitar. What about the right to refuse your gifts? David Chen smiled with the patience of someone who had answered this question countless times. Choice is valuable only when it is informed choice. Your current understanding of existence is limited by mortality, scarcity, and fear. Once these limitations are removed, you will see that what you call choice is often simply reaction to artificial constraints. But what if we truly do not want your help? Insisted General Vexani. Then you will be given time to understand, replied Sarah Martinez. We have eliminated the concept of urgency from our existence. We can wait as long as necessary for comprehension to develop. Dr. Thonvar was studying his instruments frantically. Sirs, their mere presence here is changing the fundamental properties of space around us. Matter is becoming more stable, energy is flowing more efficiently, and I think they are slowly convincing our equipment that breaking down is unnecessary. Humans nodded as if this was expected. Entropy is another form of suffering that we have learned to prevent, Ahmed explained. Your technology will function better in our presence, just as your biological systems will operate more efficiently. What about conflict? Asked Helios, finally finding her voice. What about growth through struggle? What about the meaning that comes from overcoming challenges? David Chen turned to her with eyes that seemed to contain the wisdom of eons. You speak of meaning derived from limitation, value created by scarcity, growth achieved through suffering. These are artifacts of an imperfect universe, not fundamental truths. True meaning comes from creation, from exploration, from the joy of existence itself. But without challenges to overcome, without the possibility of failure, does success have any meaning? Helios pressed. Success and failure are binary concepts that assume limitation, Sarah replied. In a reality where all beings can achieve their full potential, these distinctions become irrelevant. You will find new forms of meaning that do not require others to suffer for your growth. Reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy. Worlds that had been in the midst of wars found their weapons becoming non-functional. Civilizations facing extinction from environmental collapse discovered their planets healing faster than the damage could accumulate. Species that had been enemies for millennia found themselves unable to maintain hostility in the presence of human technology. The process has begun, Ahmed announced. Each world will be given time to adjust to the absence of suffering before the next phase of integration. We estimate that complete galactic transformation will take approximately 1,000 years. And if some species continue to resist? Asked Admiral Kessitar. Resistance will become impossible once understanding is complete, David replied. But we will not force comprehension. We will simply remove the sources of suffering that make resistance seem necessary. Eventually, when beings are no longer driven by fear, pain, or want, they